So sorry.
A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited to welcome you all for the first webinar, first episode of this webinar series for the year of 2022, organized by the Seminars Committee of the BASL 2022-2023 on the topic of proposals of the BASL to restore political and economic stability in the country. This webinar is conducted on the Zoom platform, and for those who have been unable to join us through Zoom, can also join us by watching the live stream in the BASL YouTube channel. We would like to thank the Seminars Committee of the BASL, headed by Mr. Isrubala Patabandi, Secretary to the BASL. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the President of the BASL, Mr. Salia Pires, President's Council, for all the support and the guidance given to us in organizing this webinar series. Today's topic is proposals of the BASL to restore political and economic stability in the country. And joining us today, we have the distinguished panel of experts ready to enlighten us and share their knowledge and experience. We will have 3 panelists and the moderator for the day. So each panelist will have more time to share their knowledge and experience with us on the topic. And I now take this opportunity to introduce the esteemed panel and the moderator for the day. Firstly, I would like to introduce Mr. Ikram Mohammed, President Counsel. Mr. Mohammed is a senior President's Counsel and he is in practice for the past 47 years. Mr. Mohammed is also a past president of the BASL and a former lecturer in the Law Faculty of Colombo and Law College. Secondly, I would like to introduce Mr. Chandaka Jayasundara, President's Counsel. Mr. Jayasundara holds an LLM in International Trade Law from the University of Colombo, who is specializing in commercial law with special emphasis on maritime law, transport law, cross-border trade law, company law, intellectual property law, and banking law. Mr. Jayasundara's practice since 1991 is mainly in the Commercial High Court, Admiralty Courts, and the Appellate Courts, representing both corporate and individual clients. And he has also represented clients at several local and international arbitration proceedings and has also acted as an arbitrator. Our next speaker for the day is Mr. Salia Pires, President's Counsel, President of the BASL. And Mr. Salia Pires practices criminal law in the original courts and appellate courts. And prior to joining the private bar, he was a state counsel from 1993 to 1997. The moderator for the day is Mr. Pulasti Rupasinghe, attorney at law. Mr. Rupasinghe is an independent practitioner specializing in the areas of civil litigation, arbitration, public law, and corporate law. He is also presently functioning as a counsel at Neelakandan and Neelakandan Attorneys at Law. And Mr. Pulasti was called to the bar in 2011 and was an associate at Julius and Creasy Attorneys at Law, after which he was a junior counsel at the chambers of Mr. Faiza Mustafa, President's Counsel. Mr. Pulasti holds Bachelor of Laws and Master of Laws degrees from the University of Colombo, and also he has functioned as an advisor to the Ministry of Local Government and the Ministry of Sports. Members joining this session by Zoom may send their questions through the Q&A chat box to reach the moderator. And I will now hand over the proceedings to the moderator. Over to you, Mr. Rupasinghe, sir.
Yes, thank you, Pasiduni. Welcome all who are joining us via multiple platforms like Zoom, Facebook Live, and YouTube. Today, we have joined to this session to talk about one of the hot button issues in the country, the BASL's proposals to restore political and economic stability in the country. And I don't think anyone who is joining us requires any introduction or background information about the present predicament of the country. There is a crippling economic crisis which has caused much hardship and also shortages of essential goods and services to the public. And there is large-scale disaffection among the members of the general public regarding the present state of affairs. And the BASL, in fact, is at the forefront of seeking to protect the people's rights, headed by our President, Mrs. Ali Piris, and the Secretary of the BASL, Mr. Isru Balapatapandi. So we, I think, in this current scenario, the BASL has come up with a set of which I feel are fairly comprehensive proposals to address the present crisis at hand, after much debate and deliberation by the members and the Bar Council and the Executive Committee of the BASL. So I would like to firstly open the panel discussion to Mr. Piris. So as the present president of the BASL, as well as one of the leading practitioners in the sphere of public law in this country, can you elaborate on to us the objective and the intention behind the BASL formulating the present set of proposals, which has now, it appears, has formed the basis of the civil society discourse relating to the present national crisis. And also, I must at the start inform the panelists as well as those participants who are joining us that I will be coming back to Mr. Piris right at the end of the panel discussion again with regard to the common minimum program that has been outlined in the proposals of the BASL. But sir, firstly, can you tell us what was the objective and the intention in formulating the proposals that has been submitted by the BASL?
So, Tulasi, would you want me to outline the proposals itself, or that will be later on?
No, I think the other panelists would be talking about the constitutional and the economic aspects. I would like you to educate us about the objective and the intention of this exercise.
So one thing is that the BASL has for some time, since December, we have observed the looming economic crisis, and we started discussions with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce in December, and then thereafter in January we issued a statement on behalf of the Bar Association setting out our concerns about the economy and calling upon the government to take action in relation to the looming economic crisis, because we identify the economic crisis as affecting the rule of law, and ultimately the issues we have raised have unfortunately proven to be true. This was way back in January. So with the issues which arose with the resignation of the cabinet of the ministers, except the Prime Minister, we, subcommittee of the Executive Committee, went into these proposals. We had discussions also with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, and we came up with a set of proposals. So our objectives are to try to create political and economic stability, to create economic and political stability in the country, because we believe that unless there is political stability, there will be no economic stability. We know that at the moment there are strikes, work stoppages, closure of roads, protests, so on, and these are leading to these are actually affecting the economy. Now, it might be easy for some people to say that, why don't you open the stop protests, start working, then the economy will pick up. But that is not going to happen in that way. Today we met almost some of the key major players in this, including the President of Sri Lanka, and we pointed out that the ground situation is precarious, and unless you stabilize the country, unless you have political stability, you are going to end up in a deeper economic crisis. And I think all those responsible are quite aware of this situation. So our suggestions are that in order to create a climate where there can be political stability, you would need to have a government which is stable. And for a government which is stable, it is not merely the simple majority in parliament, but you need to create a climate of confidence among the people that there is an effective government which is going to address their grievances. You need a government which will take the people into its confidence, tell the people the truth, perhaps to share with the people the hardships that they are going to face in the next many months. And it is in this background that we set out in our proposals 4 objectives. 1, to create political, economic, and social stability, to create an environment to address the fundamental problems that have brought about the current crisis, so that we will later on elaborate on that, to restructure external debt and enter into programs with multilateral authorities, including the IMF, to obtain bridging finance, to create an environment to combat corruption and ensure accountability and strengthening of independent institutions. And so it is in this background, these are the objectives of the proposals which are made by the BSL. And we have identified as the overarching requirement a stable government with the ability to implement reforms domestically and the credibility to negotiate with the IMF and other agencies and friendly countries to help Sri Lanka to get out of the economic crisis. So it is in that light that the BSL has come up with 13 proposals, which we have proposed to the powers that be and to the parties in both the government and opposition as a document. We will later elaborate as we go on the contents of those proposals.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Actually, I would like to come back to you right at the end of the panel discussion again with regard to the CMP, or the Common Minimum Program, that has been outlined in the BSL's proposals. But before that, our next panelist I would like to turn to is Mr. Mohammed. Sir, you are one of the most distinguished and highly respected members of the private bar. And could you elaborate and comment on the proposals for constitutional reform, as well as what I see as a set of reforms that has been put forward by the Bar Association to strengthen the public accountability of public officials and politicians in governance, and to improve transparency in the conducting of affairs or business relating to the general public. So, sir, can you comment on the proposals that have been set out in the BSL proposals in this regard?
Yes, thank you very much, Kulasti. First of all, I must thank Mr. Salia Piris to have headed the Bar Association at this moment, and which association has been recognized and can be looked up to as an association who could come to solve the problems that we are facing. Therefore, Mr. Salia Piris, I thank you and the members of the Bar Association for having taken this prominence in trying to solve the problems faced by the country. Now, as Kulasti pointed out earlier, we know the present situation. The government, if you examine from the constitutional point of view, has totally failed in giving the people what the government should be doing in terms of the constitution. Now, if one examines the preamble to the constitution, we see the constitution has been accepted and admitted to assure to all people the freedom, equality, justice, fundamental human rights, and independence of the judiciary, as an intangible heritage that guarantees the dignity and well-being of succeeding generation of people of Sri Lanka. And that is what the present people who are on the road is crying for. The Constitution says it guarantees the dignity and freedom of the individual, which is assured, and to assure just social, economic, and cultural order attain unity of the country. Now, in terms of Article 3 of the Constitution, in the Republic of Sri Lanka, the sovereignty is in the people and is inalienable. Sovereignty includes the powers of the government, fundamental rights, and the franchise. Now, in terms of Article 4 of the Constitution, the sovereignty of the people is exercised by the legislature, legislative power to the parliament, the executive power to the president, and the judicial power of the people to the parliament through the courts. Now, if we examine Article 27 of the Constitution, which provides for the directive principles of the state policy, which clearly shows that the government and the cabinet is there for the well-being of the society, which says the directive principles of the state policy herein contained shall guide the parliament, the president and the cabinet of ministers in the enactment of laws and the governance of Sri Lanka for the establishment of just and free society. Now, the Article 27(2) details out what are those principles. If you see Article C in particular, the realization of all citizens of adequate standard of living for themselves and their families, including adequate food, clothing, housing, the continuous improvement of living conditions, and the full enjoyment of leisure and social opportunities. F says the establishment of a just society, order in which the means of production, distribution, and exchange are not centralized and equally distributed among the people. I also like to draw particularly the attention of subclause 9. The state shall ensure social security and welfare. Now, if we examine what has happened today, these principles or the whole purpose for which the parliament and the government is established is lost. People don't have the basic necessities. They don't have the basic freedom to exist within their whatever the trade that they want to do, because everything is not available to the people as they want. We are in darkness. People do not have money. We do not have dollars to import what we want. So the situation has become economically, it is completely a ruination, as due to which the people have started slogans that the government must go and so forth and so on. So the entire country has come to a standstill, as we know. It is in this background, the Bar Association has considered that it's a duty of the Bar Association to bring about some sort of a settlement. Otherwise, there has been a deadlock between the parliament and also between the citizens who are being governed by the country. Within the parliament also, there's a deadlock. There is no cooperation, and they do not. In fact, once we examine, the parliament has failed because there have not been independence as regards various institutions which should have independence. They have not appointed people of competence. Then there is also a complaint that there is a lot of abuse and misuse and fraud in the governmental matters and government funding. So one has, therefore, the Bar Association, considering all these things, have evolved these recommendations which should work within the constitutional framework of Sri Lanka. Although the people say that all 225 people must go out, which is also cannot be done constitutionally. Therefore, the Bar Association first concept is that all elections must be consistent with the Constitution and the relevant legal instruments and transparency. Transitional provisions that are being recommended are purely for the exigency of the present situation should not be used as a precedent. And the first proposal, I see the first major proposal by the Bar Association is to introduce the 21st Amendment, repealing the 20th Amendment and restoring the 19th Amendment. In doing so, the Bar Association has pointed out the number of judges of the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court should remain intact. And the introduction of the 19th Amendment should result in the re-establishment of the Constitutional Council and the independent commissions which existed under the 19th Amendment, with whilst enhancing their financial independence and transparency, accountability, so that we will have a better administration. The Bar Association has also pointed out that in addition to the 19th Amendment, the 21st Amendment should stipulate what the Bar Association has considered is more appropriate in terms of the requests of the people. One is the appointment of governor of the central bank and the monetary board should also be done by the approval of the Constitutional Council. Otherwise, politically people are appointed with political influence, and therefore the expected result is not realized or obtained. Then the Bar Association has also recommended, which is also a very vital recommendation for an effective and stable government and to achieve the goals of the government, namely the appointment of the secretaries to the ministries, governors, ambassadors, heads of mission to be done on the advice of the Prime Minister in consulting with the Cabinet of Ministers, so that it will not be an appointment made by a single individual in the exercise of his or her authority. So here, if in terms of what the Bar Association has proposed, there will be a consensus in the appointment and a better consideration, and then these officers will be filled with people of competence, which is not seen happening today. Then the Bar Association has in that amendment, they also want to introduce another concept as regards presidential pardon. Now we see presidential pardon is being given to various people, including the convicts who have been convicted by a divisional bench of the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court and the lawyers have become totally powerless, and the criminals are being pardoned and who are back in society, which will also, which in fact affect the rule of law. And in my own view, it tarnishes the image and the independence of our judiciary, which should not and which should never happen. Therefore, the Bar Association recommended that presidential pardon should be done according to recommendation by a body established by law, appointed by the President on the recommendation of the Constitutional Council, so that there will be some rationality in exercising the privilege of pardon. Then the other parts also had recommended that with the enactment of the 21st Amendment of the Constitution, all secretaries to the ministries to be appointed, and all independent commissions other than Judicial Service Commission to be reconstituted. So that is also on the basis the secretaries appointed to the ministry are purely political, as a result of which at times there is no proper communication between the secretaries and the minister, or even if there is communication, both are inefficient, inexperienced, and not qualified for the purpose for which they are appointed, the net result being the present day situation. Then the Bar Association also recommended that President should not hold any portfolio. That is on the basis that the President should not be an executive president anymore, which is also enacted subsequently. Then the Bar Association, one of the most important recommendation made by the Bar Association is the abolition of the executive presidency as early as possible. That this is necessitated because the people have lost confidence in the concept of executive presidency. And everywhere you see that the executive presidency, they say the president must go and the executive presidency must be removed. and all of us know that all the political parties, before facing an election, they have campaigned and they have pushed that the executive presidency should be abolished, but none of the parties, upon coming into power, has been doing this. I think at least now, in view of the present trend, I think the recommendation made by the Bar Association is most appropriate, which is needed in the circumstances. It is said that it must be abolished and not later than 15 months. And said the amendment that effects should be passed in Parliament not later than the 30th November 2022 and must set the operative day by which the executive presidency will be abolished. The executive presidency will be replaced by a parliamentary form of government where the Prime Minister as the head of the government and the cabinet minister is accountable to the Parliament. So this, I think, is very vital, and we are perhaps every citizen is crying for the removal of the president, and in that the fundamental basis is that the abolition of executive presidency. Then the present government, as in view of the various agitations done, as we know, the ministers resigned except the Prime Minister, and still the people have no confidence that the government could bring the country out of this mess. So therefore, the Bar Association has recommended to establish interim government of national unity. Now, this is in terms of within the constitution, which is an arrangement made within the Parliament, which is perfectly lawful. So Bar Association thinking is that we must have interim government of national unity consist of 50 cabinet ministers. The Prime Minister will be the member of the Parliament who is able to establish consensus among all the parties recognized by the Speaker in Parliament on national economy and to enact national reform. If there is no member in Parliament who can meet this criteria, to exit of the situation, a vacancy, Bar Association has recommended to be created by resignation of a national list MP, may be used to facilitate the entry into Parliament of an individual who will meet this criteria, where there is a bipartisan consensus to appoint a person who is not presently a member of Parliament as a Prime Minister, even if some individual name did not appear in the original list submitted to the National Economic List. That is only on the basis the present the crisis that we are facing needs a person who can command the confidence of all parties and who can bring about a consensus and who can thereby bring about all whatever the laws, whatever the arrangement that are necessary can be brought about within the Parliament with the consensus of people. And there must be a person who will be not interested in political motivation and whose interest will be solely the interest of this country and the people and not anything else. So that is what the BSL is expecting. Then the other fundamental, one important concept suggested by the Bar Association is the establishment in advisory council. Bar Association recommended that an advisory council should consist of 15 qualified professionals from all disciplines corresponding to the 15 ministries. So if that is established, every ministry will have an expert relating to that minister's functions and work and duties, and which is something which no government has done up to date. So if this is established in terms of the thinking of the Bar Association, I am sure we as citizens of this country will be lucky to get the best expert advice in respect of each ministry in order to overcome the present crisis. Then the Bar Association has also recommended the abolition of the presidential commissions established and also not to implement the recommendation of Mr. Jasabe Ratna's committee. Then the other fundamental thing the Bar Association has established is the Cabinet of National Unity must prepare a common minimum program. Now, which is a fundamental thing which will govern the interim government during the rest of the period. This matter will be spoken to by our learned panelists, after me, which is established now, which is necessary to establish the economic situation of the country, which will then bring about political stability, and we should be able to overcome the present problem. The Bar Association has also suggested that the national government unity will be for a maximum period of 18 months and a further period of 6 weeks as a caretaker government to oversee election. At the conclusion of the 18th month, the parliament shall be dissolved and a general election will be held at the expiration of 6 weeks. The government of national unity will then cease to exist. So it is what the Bar Association has done is to bring in the best possible function, the functionaries within the parliament in terms of the present constitution, and to get the best possible expertise in the process. And this will, I believe, this has to be done by all parliamentarians and but by all political parties solely in the interests of the country, not looking at their sole interest, and to keep up to what is expected from them to do the best for us and the country. And overall, I think this is perhaps the best solution to bring in a unity government, an interim government among all the parties in the parliament, and to make a resurrection of this and to bring about a social and political stability, which will at least assist to an extent to help the country to come out of this problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now invite Mr. Jayasundara to join in. So you are one of the leading commercial lawyers in the country, and you have advised and represented many national and international clients in local as well as international judicial and dispute resolution forums. So I think you are best equipped to tell us, comment about the proposals of the BASL regarding the addressing of the national economic crisis. And I must say that I think some of your comments may overlap with the common minimum program, but I believe your input in this regard is relevant for this discussion. And also, I would like you also, if time permits, to comment on the Independent Advisor Council that has been proposed in the BASL's proposals.
Thank you, Pulasti, and thank you for the generous introduction. So, just to put things in context, the background for the presentation of these proposals, I would like to just, and these all these data is available and was available since 2019. It's available. It was available and published by the central bank, because I think we need to understand why stable government is necessary at the moment. So if you okay, so as acknowledged by most people, the beginning of the end was the tax reforms in 2019, by which the leaving everything else aside, the total registered taxpayers dropped 33.5%. The the registration with the replacement of the payee, 42% of the revenue dropped, and with the increasing the registration threshold to 300 million, 71.8% of the VAT revenue was lost. Then So that was in 2019. 2019. So as a percentage wise, the total revenue of the country, because of this is only because of the tax break, dropped from 9.1 in 2020. It dropped to 9.1, and then 2021, according to the latest report, central bank report, the total revenue is now down to 8.7% of the GDP. This is, if not the one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios in the world. If I think we are almost right at the end. However, so the second cause was the foreign reserves, official reserves or foreign reserves dwindling down to 1.9 billion, I think officially, but as the finance minister said in parliament last week, the liquid foreign reserves, that is usable foreign reserves, is only 50 million rupees. And today I saw Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe saying that it has now dropped to 25 million. So that means we don't have the foreign reserves to even import to finance the cost of 1 day for Sri Lanka. The general economic view is that you must have to be comfortable. You must have about 4 to 5 months of imports could be financed by the foreign reserves. 1.9 billion means we have about a month. If I'm not 100% sure of the numbers, but if it is 50 million, that means one tanker load of petrol costs about 42 million. So we don't at the moment have official reserves even to cover 1 day's imports to Sri Lanka. So that's the second biggest problem. And due to the fact of the foreign reserves going down, as well as the tax revenue going down, our global ratings have gone down from, if you look at 2015, from B1, stable, according to Moody's, it's now CAA1, but now it has gone down, I think, to triple C. Sorry, Fitch rating is triple C. S&P, I think, has now dropped to default status. Now that was specifically, as set out in the IMF report of 2022, was specifically because of the drop in tax revenue. And when our ratings dropped in 2019, access to the global money market closed. So it is generally it's accepted that you roll over your debt, but to roll over your debt, you have to have access to the international money market. That access was lost in 2020. So that's the other cause. So then this is one of the most glaring instances, and this relates directly to the pegging of the rupee to the dollar at 203 first and then 208 afterwards. So if you can see in this graph, 2021 is in red. Generally, if you look at 2020 or 2019, if you look at June, you're looking at 537 million. It dropped to 572 million and then dropped to 478 million. This is up to August 2021. Now, this is all available in the central bank reports. You can get an idea. The latest available data is for February 2022. You can see the amount of money that is not coming through the official channels. So in 2019, before COVID, it was, if you take January, 545 million. During COVID, it went up to 580. 21, it went up to 675. The pegging began end of 2021. Now it has dropped to 259. So in each month, Sri Lanka is losing $400 million only from workers' remittances. And February, it has dropped by about 300 million from the relative month in 2021. Now, the official reserves, this is again from the central bank, 2021 estimated was 3.5 billion, but in actual fact now it is 1.9 billion, and usable foreign reserves are, as the finance minister said, is 50 million. So as you can see, the red line, that is the months of imports that you need, and you can see that general accepted form is that you need 3 to 4 months of imports, and now in 2021 estimate was it was 2.5 months. Now it is with the Chinese swap, we have about 1 month's official reserves. So those are the causes. Okay, so like any good lawyer will know, you know the problem, you need to now sort out the problem, you need to resolve that problem. Now, as said by the finance minister and all economic experts that have spoken about, both internationally and local, we need to do 4 or 5 things. I'll just take 3 for the moment. We need to restructure our debt, because one problem is our ratings have gone down. Our ratings will come back up to, so that we can take loans from the money international market, is if we get back to a proper stable rating. That's number 1. Number 2 is that we need to get our revenue up, so that even to give the essential services to the people of this country, you need revenue. So the next main thing would be to raise the taxes, at least to get it up to what it was in 2019, which was about 12.5%, 11.5 to 12.5% of the GDP. So we need to get that back. So VAT reforms, maybe GST reforms, income tax reforms, corporate tax reforms, all will have to be done. That's the second one. Then one of the other main issues is with regard to the currency, which will be in turn, if you stabilize the foreign reserves, and if you increase the foreign reserves, the currency will stabilize somewhere down the line. Then we also have one of the drags to the government revenue is the state operated enterprises, which are running at like 95 billion rupees a year. I think CPC is running at a loss of 95 billion. CEB is also in the same thing. So those are the problems that you need to solve. Giving due credit to the new finance minister and the new governor, they are dealing with the restructuring of the debt. That also doesn't happen overnight. We are talking about basically, at least to get the negotiation started, we are looking at least another 2 to 3 weeks to start negotiating with the bondholders. Then we are again better later than never, or earlier, they have gone to the IMF. That process also will take another 6 months or so. So as set out in the bar association proposals, there are 3 things. 1 is restructuring. That process has started. 2 is to go to the IMF. That process can start only after the restructuring. 3 is the stabilization of the economic conditions of this country. So those are the solutions to the problems that have now beset Sri Lanka. We don't have to say whose fault or who was responsible. Maybe a forum needs to be appointed to check or investigate as to who exactly was at fault, because the politicians are blaming the officials are not saying anything, and one of the former ministers yesterday said politicians can't make fiscal policy that is done with by the officials, so officials have to be blamed. So those problems are there, and as far as I can see, the only step that this government is taking is the debt restructuring. Of course, that is one of the major components in that. But even to restructure your debt, we have to go and speak to the bondholders. We have to go and speak to the IMF and also the World Bank and other multilateral agencies and our bilateral partners. Now, one of the main things in finance, as we know, if we really dumb it down, to what we know personally. If your company is in default, negotiating with a bank to restructure, the banks are not going to believe one single word of the directors of that company who are responsible for that default. They are not going to listen to those people, because there is a huge paucity, there's a huge vacuum of trust and confidence in Sri Lanka and in Sri Lanka's financial system. So if again we go back to the company situation, they will not trust what the defaulting. If I'm a commercial lawyer, I always have to use those. If you can't trust the directors, will you trust that the directors will do what they promise to do at this stage? So when there is no stability, when there is no trust or confidence, then we have a problem. Number two is that we have to project, at least in any negotiation, we have to project a confident, stable, at least long-term, medium-term, short-term solutions to these bondholders. These are Wall Street bondholders. They know exactly what is happening. We can't be, we have to be like 200% confident in our proposals. So for the last 2 weeks, maybe other than in the Treasury and the Central Bank, I don't see this government doing anything other than trying to save itself from getting kicked out of Parliament. That seems to me, from looking at the Parliament debates, or it's not a debate, it's just a discussion. You can see that the focus of this government is now completely political, this government. So in the same way, the opposition is also doing whatever the opposition has to do. The small opposition parties are doing what they have to do. Right along, there are so many millions of people on the road protesting, but no solution even to the essential services problems that we have in Sri Lanka. Plus, how are we going to do the bridging finance? How are we getting money for us to survive for the next 3-4 months? There is nothing that we can see sitting from outside that is being done. Now, that is because this government, leaving aside the fact that, as Mr. Mohammed says, that the majority or a fair amount of people are saying that the government and the president must go, leaving that aside, there is absolutely, at least for us to see, a cogent plan that has been presented by anybody at this moment. It is only because of political circumstances that they are doing. So it is in that background that I would say that the proposals given by the Bar Association with regard to the economic situation becomes very, very important, because you have to look at the underlying principles of this proposal, and the common program is that to set up an interim government which will be made up of all the people who are in Parliament, all the political parties who are in Parliament at the moment. Now, I don't think this has been highlighted enough, but as the finance minister has repeatedly said, we are going to have a terrible 2 years to go, and there's going to be huge amount of reforms that are going to hit everybody across the board, including taking away subsidies, maybe privatizing or reorganizing, restructuring the SOEs, which means petroleum, CEB, the banks, all will have to be restructured. Then taxation will have to increase. So those are very, very unpopular and politically suicidal reforms that will have to be made at this juncture for us to get out of this problem. So no political party will want to be, as they say in colloquial terms, no political party wants to be the Billy Boy. They don't want to be the person who does this unpopular, politically suicide reforms. And that is one of the reasons that none of these reforms have ever been made in this country, because they are looking from one election to the other. So the way out is spread it around. So in this 1.5 years period, there will be, by this interim government, there will be economic reforms advised by the panel of experts. They will have to, and this is something that they cannot do, they have to do the raise the taxes, restructure the SOEs, bring back the money from the out of the Undial and Wahala, those systems. There's the huge, at the moment, the biggest issue is the interest rate, which is going at 25%, which will basically kill the SME market, SME manufacturers and industry. So those political reforms should have been made long time ago. It was never done because those economic reforms are politically suicide. But if this interim government where everybody is responsible to taking those decisions, then what happens is that nobody can be blamed thereafter on a political basis. You went and raised the taxes, therefore we are not voting for you. You went and privatized CEB, therefore we are not voting for you. You can't do that because every single political party represented in parliament will be responsible for those reforms, however politically suicidal it is. So if it is political suicide, it is political suicide for everybody. All the parties will have to, the political problems will be diluted to that extent. At the same time, if it becomes successful, and that after 2 years or 1.5 years, as suggested by the Bar Association, if we do get out of this mess, then in the same way, all political parties will share the benefits and the whatever the votes or the recognition that they get as being the people who solve the problem. Now, this cannot be done on a political basis, breaking into and what has been happening in parliament for the last 2 weeks. That is not how countries are run. That is not how legislatures are run. So if we can't get this a decision from the executive, if we can't get a decision from the legislature, then we need a solution like this, which is, I would say, what I would like to call a pan-political interim government, so that every person participates in getting out of this problem. To resolve in this problem, every person will get the blame for the unpopular reforms that you are doing, and every person will be given the accolade for solving this problem, so that the political aspect of governance in this country is taken away. I think this has not been highlighted enough, that this might be the solution to get out of this. I say, as Mr. Pires said, it is a political problem, which is without which, if you don't solve the political problem, you can't solve the economic problem, because nobody is going to sit at a negotiating table to restructure our debt and then not expecting the faces that sit on the other side of that table to come for the second round. If nobody is sure who's going to be in parliament or who's going to be in power or the government tomorrow or day after tomorrow, which we don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So in such a situation, it's imperative that we have this sort of a pan-political agreement, that where every political party becomes a stakeholder, and even if they go back later on to negotiate, the other side, the bondholders or the IMF will know these guys have all participated in this. They will have to be held responsible, and we have trust that they have done it, because they are now doing it. Without doing anything, talking and screaming and shouting and hitting each other in parliament, nobody will have any confidence in this country or its systems or its institutions, as long as this, I wouldn't say it's anarchy, but this instability remains. So I would suggest, if you can give me a little bit of time, if I can just...
Yes, you can do it.
Just to show the economic aspects of the proposal that was presented by the Bar Association. So the overarching requirement, as Salia said, is a stable government with the ability to implement reforms domestically and the credibility to negotiate with the IMF, other multilateral agencies, and friendly countries to help Sri Lanka get out of the economic crisis. So at the moment, we don't have a stable government. We don't have an able government. We don't have a credible government. So we can't go and talk about debt restructuring in Wall Street or talk to the IMF in Washington or the World Bank in Washington without being stable, able, or credible. That is the ultimate test. So as far as the economy is concerned, what impacts the economy is the problem of appointing the political appointment of governors of the central bank and the monetary board has to be done with the Constitutional Council, which will give some transparency and will also give some recognition to the persons who are appointed. Then, with regard to the economy, to establish the interim government of national unity with 15 cabinet minister. Cabinet minister has to be from parliament. If you can't find him, or before we come to that, member of parliament who is establish a consensus among all political parties recognized by the speaker in parliament on the national economy and to enact necessary reforms. I come back to this interim government of national unity will be pan-political. Everybody represented, every political party, I believe that is the underlying understanding, will have a stake in the interim government of national unity unless they don't want to participate. That is a different issue. However, this pan-political arrangement of an interim government must therefore have the ability and the stability so that with regard to the national economy and more importantly, as far as I am concerned, to enact necessary reforms with regard to mainly the revenue collection. Then, with regard to an independent advisory council consisting of 15 qualifying professionals. Now, this is brilliant, but as you know what Sri Lanka is, you have appointed independent advisory council and you don't listen to the independent advisory council. However, the Bar Association proposes that further down, just give me 1 second. In the common program, that the national government of unity will or must act in terms of the advice granted. I'm just trying to figure out. Okay, 10, the Cabinet of Unity shall prepare a common minimum program in consultation with the Advisory Council, and the CMP will be tabled in Parliament, so on and so forth. So those are the as far as the economy is concerned. So if you can't get technocrats into Parliament now, or if they are not there now there is proposal that the Prime Minister is brought from outside through the national list. If you can't get technocrats within Parliament, if there are no competent people, especially with regard to finance and trade, if you don't have people in Parliament now, I would say bring them from outside. Now, at least until that is done, and that is another can of worms, nobody, I think, would want to open to bring outsiders into Parliament to run things without the franchise, the power of the franchise behind them. You leave that aside, but at least get this advisory committee filled with independent people, strong people, and see that the interim government of national unity does what they tell you to do. If that happens, I think Sri Lanka is a resilient country. I don't think we'll ever go down the road of some other countries that are being talked about. But now the CMP, the common program, talks about the Basel proposal, talks about debt restructuring, negotiating an IMF program, and obtaining bridging finance from bilateral. I think that is already happening, but it is happening by a government and the present finance minister, I think in good faith, is trying to do his best in an absolutely disastrous position. At least we have to give him credit for trying, even at this late stage, for trying to get out of this mess and doing things which should have been done 1.5 years ago, and then getting blamed for doing things which should have been done 1.5 years ago. Then the other biggest issue would be the immediate essential goods and services, the resolution of the problem. That, as you will notice, is only with regard to the essential goods that are being imported. So at the moment, the shortages are directly connected to the lack of foreign reserves that we have, or at least not having any money to do that. So with the debt restructuring and with the IMF program, that will be solved, but we are looking at 6 months. So at the moment, the most important thing now is to get together with our bilateral partners, our friendly countries, and maybe some of the multilateral agencies, and try and bridge this. And these sort of things are done every day in normal in a normal business environment, getting bridging finances until you get the loan restructured. All that happens every day in this country also. So it's not, as Dr. Harsha De Silva keeps on saying, this is not rocket science. It's just that you need a strong mindset to do what is for the common good. If you do that, although they are blaming 74 years, this is only 2 years messed up everything. That is the common issue that is there. So until such time that happens, if you want to get rid of these shortages, which are directly linked to imports, then you have to look at bridging finances. We have burned so many bridges with friendly countries by cancelling their contracts or asking so many things from them before we give the contract to them. We have burned bridges, but maybe it's time to build those bridges, and to build that bridge and getting some confidence in them that whatever you're giving will be used properly, has to be done, and can be done only with a stable government, which I believe, if these proposals are accepted and worked on, will solve our problem, our problem immediate or midterm. I'm sorry, I went a bit over, Tulasti, and I will be glad to answer any questions that have been posed. Thank you,
sir. Thank you, sir. I would like to come back to Mr. Piris. So are you there with us?
And then unfortunately my camera there, something has gone wrong with my power, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you clearly, sir. As I indicated at the start, I would like you to address us on the CMP, or the Common Minimum Program, that has been set out in the Bar Association's proposals, which I think are a set of comprehensive proposals to address the immediate national need. And also, just to piggyback on something that Mr. Jayasundar said, I also, if you are at liberty to say so, can you tell us, because we are all curious to know, what has been the reception, what has been the response of the civil society, and also of the various stakeholders in Parliament and in the political system to the Bar Association's proposals?
So first and foremost, so let me just set out the Common Minimum Program. I think Mr. Jayasundar also has gone through some of those aspects of the program. So I think the idea of a Common Minimum Program is for a maximum period of 18 months that we encourage the parties to arrive at things which can be done. So we have suggested debt restructuring, financing, resolution of the shortage of goods, divestiture, if they are having privatization, to be done in a transparent manner, upholding the rule of law, advancing Sri Lanka's human rights standards, then enacting legislation on the proceeds of crime. We know that on corruption, state recovery of state assets, amending the assets and liabilities law, campaign financing regulation, so on. And we have also suggested to strengthen the committees within Parliament. Of course, we have made some proposals on the PTA to adopt the BSL proposals on the PTA, because that also relates to GSP Plus, and also certain matters relating to election reform. So the idea of this is that the members of members of Parliament or the government, that they take responsibility and agree on a common program, so that we don't want people to undermine. We don't want one political party to undermine the other. Otherwise, you can have a situation such as in Greece, where governments would change frequently. We know that in countries like Italy, also there have been changes from time to time. Governments change. Every 1 year, government changes. So to prevent that sort of situation, we are proposing that you arrive at this common minimum program. Now, Pulasti, to answer your question on the reception of political parties, we see the parties we have met within the course of today. We met His Excellency the President, the Honorable Prime Minister. Then we met, all of these were on the request. His Excellency the President and the Prime Minister sought meetings with the BSL. Then the leader of the opposition and the groups aligned with the SJB, as well as the independent MPs led by President Maithripala Sirisena. They requested meetings, and they met us at the Bar Association. And there seemed to be broad acceptance in principle of these proposals. Of course, the devil is in the detail, and how are everyone to what we suggest is that everyone must sit down together. These various factions in Parliament, parties must sit down together, and you have to sit at a negotiating table. And even if it takes you 24 hours or 48 hours, thrash out what you're going to do. We impressed upon all these parties that there is a dire need. We know that the economy is on the brink of collapse. And although Mr. Jayasundara was very optimistic and said we won't go the way of some of the other countries when that we are resilient, unless we get our act together, unless the government gets it, unless all the political parties get its act together, things are going to be far more difficult. So where the civil society is concerned, again, our proposals, we had detailed discussions with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. And in fact, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and the Bar Association together handed over the proposals to the Venerable Mahanayaka Theras of the Malwatta and Asgiriya chapters. We will be meeting the other religious leaders also during this week and handing over the proposals. We have discussed with sections of the civil society. We had the chamber invited us to another meeting where we discussed these proposals. This was last week, about 10 days ago, with the joint chambers, with the president of the OPA, with representatives from the Sri Lanka Medical Association and the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. So we are trying to build a platform where these proposals can be supported. What we have proposed are not political slogans. But of course, we must realize that there are people on the ground, people who are protesting, people who are in very dire circumstances. They might well feel that our proposals do not really give them all their demands. But we understood, and we understand that any change has to take place within the four corners of the Constitution. Although, and we might not be those who want change. Sometimes you might not get everything immediately, but we have urged these parties to come to a timeline and to come to agreement and start working together for the common good. And this is absolutely important. Today, we gave this example to many political parties who met us. We gave the example of the British during the Second World War, when Britain was on the brink of being invaded by Germany, of how that political parties got together. And the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party got together. They said they set up a war cabinet representative of all the parties in the Commons. And because in a time of dire crisis, we say that it is the duty of all those in Parliament to try to get this country out of this dire situation.
Thank you. I must thank all the panelists. I think it was a very enlightening discussion, and I think we have comprehensively covered the proposals at length, and also how it has been received by the powers at large. We have got a lot of questions actually from our chat box, as well as several people have messaged me on Facebook and various other social media platforms. So I as time permits, I would like the panelists to address a few questions. Of course, most of these questions seem to overlap with each other. So I will, in broad terms, pose some of these questions that has been raised quite often by many participants. I think I would like, in fact, Mr. Piris, if you can, sir, just comment on the specific proposals made in item number 9 of the BSS proposals with regard to the rescinding or the abolition of the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry on Political Victimization and the Special Presidential Commission. So if you can just briefly say the thinking behind the specific request by the BA, sir.
So they are, of course, this was related to the commission, and we felt that in order to create a consensus within Parliament, within Parliament, that it is necessary to create that climate of confidence. And it is in that light we suggested that the Special Presidential Commission of Inquiry, which was underway, that it be rescinded. So from what we are aware, the warrant, His Excellency the President has not renewed the warrant of that commission. And that was because we believe it is necessary to create that, if you are looking for cooperation, that commission, that sort of commission would not be suitable in these circumstances.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to pose this question actually to all the panelists. So there are so many questions posed by participants with regard to the alienation of competent or professionals or competent people from the political process due to the present political culture. I wonder whether any of the panelists would like to comment on that in view of the proposals made by the BSL.
Well, if I just start on that,
Yes.
then perhaps Chandra and Mr. Mohammed can add to it. I think the one problem is, of course, our electoral system, which discourages probably competent people from coming in. But also, I think although I am one of those who disagree with those who say you must, those who are ministers and MPs should be only an honorary role. No, you want them. I feel that in Singapore, ministers are well paid, but they are efficient and competent. I think I personally believe that is the way to go. But of course, you do have to change the climate, the campaign system, probably the electoral system, to ensure that professionals get in. But also, I think much of it has to do with the voter, because the voters who vote for people, and the voters, the average voter who expects the MP, the MP perhaps to attend funerals, etc., 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 funerals, weddings, so on, and looks at that rather than the work he does or his contribution to parliament, I think it's a mistake. If you have a general election today, some of those people, let's not mention them by name, but some of those people who have gained some degree of notoriety are going to be re-elected. So I think the electoral system needs change, but you can't go back to the first past the post system as a whole, because then that might be not fair by the smaller parties, and that might not reflect the views of the electorate. So you have to come to somewhere in between. And of course, professionals also should be encouraged to play a role in politics. We found this, that many young people had distanced themselves from politics. I came across, during the last week, I came across a couple of youngsters who were in the protests, and they told me that until the 3rd of April, they had not taken an interest in politics. But it was only when there was a curfew and the social media ban that they suddenly took it upon, decided to get active, and now they are fully involved, not only in protests, in organizing seminars, workshops, so on and so forth. So I think we need to get ourselves involved. Now, one of my criticisms of the corporate sector in the past was their lack of involvement and lack of being able to come out openly and say things. In December, we were telling people in the corporate sector, voice your opinion in public on the economic crisis, but they did not want to do so. And only now you find so many corporates, companies putting out posts supporting the protests, everything. But they should have voiced these things 6 months ago. Now, this is the message, I think, to all us professionals, that they have to get involved. And that is how you will find good people getting involved in politics.
Mr. Jayasundar and Mr. Mohammed, any?
Yeah, no, I would say not at the moment, not at this crisis situation, but I wonder how the constitution will consider, or the constitutionality of this matter. Can't we insist on a basic qualification for an MP? No, but certainly not at this moment, so that we will have more, even the voters are not tuned to send the best of the people to parliament, and if they have some basic qualification, to introduce some basic qualification, so that we will have parliamentarians of some qualification who can think better, who will act more responsibly. I do not know how constitutionality can be done. Certainly not at the moment. We will confuse more. But at some point, I think, Salia, we might have to think of introducing some qualification, so that the BSL must, I think, come to the forefront there and see, not at the moment. Now we will confuse more matters.
I have a slightly different view on that.
Yeah.
My view is that it is not education alone which determines. I can give a couple of examples of people who are educated, who have been corrupt, very well educated, but who have been corrupt, not only in politics but also holding high positions. So my feeling is it is all, what matters in politics is also integrity. And so I'm a little wary about insisting on minimum sets of educational professional qualifications, because some of the presidents we have had, competent presidents, were not particularly educated. They were not academically qualified. And even it is said about our first prime minister, Mr. D.S.N. that he was not academically highly qualified, but was a very good prime minister.
I know that is so in other countries as well.
Yes.
But in view of that, when you see the predicament of this country, where the political party don't take the responsibility of putting forward qualified people, if the political parties take that responsibility as a duty that is due to the society, due to the country, at least we must get the political parties motivated to put qualified and more suitable people who are honest in their own conscience.
That is true.
That's why I agree with you.
Can I just join to say why my view, and I think it's the view of some of my most of my friends also. One of the main who are professionals and people in the corporate sector. One of the main reasons that I would see two reasons. One is economic, because if I'm not mistaken, if you want to run a successful campaign to become a member of parliament, you will need at least 20 million rupees for the campaign. I don't want to say this, but I must say it, as Salia said, take home salary with all the allowances and everything of a MP today is 245,000 or 250,000 rupees. Okay, how they do it, whether that is enough, is a big issue. So 250,000 in the corporate world, you are looking at the comparative would be middle management or slightly upper management, right? So 250,000 for a member of parliament is an invitation for them to try and find some money from somewhere else, because of the political culture of this country, and especially if you're a member from the outstation, coming to Colombo, you have to run two houses, one in Colombo, one. This is what I have heard. Okay, so if the money that is given to them as salary is not sufficient for their basic needs of running their private houses as well as carrying out their political work, then that's an open invitation for them to find that money from somewhere else. So, however, in the corporate sector, you won't pay 1 million rupees to an incompetent manager. You will pay 1 million rupees as a monthly salary only to a competent manager who can produce results. So as long as the parliamentarians don't produce results and they just use the parliament as I don't know what they use it for anymore. If you don't do that, then you are not entitled to 1 million. Maybe 245,000 a month is the value that the state and everybody gives to the work done by a parliamentarian. Because you high earning corporate executives will make 1 million because they deliver results. So if you don't deliver, you go into parliament, spend your 20 million and go into parliament, and you don't deliver, you should not be paid. That I think is the biggest problem. So no professional of Pulasti is a young attorney. Pulasti, would you, after watching 5 minutes of the parliament proceedings, would you like to go and spend time, even coming from our complete disjointed court system? That is better than what is happening in parliament, right? Absolutely. So nobody, I think personally Pulasti wants to be the prime minister, but that is something else. But that is that is, I think, one of the factors that you can. The second factor is the provision is already there in the constitution of nationalist MPs. So if you go there, the fault lies directly with the political parties. The national list is always used for supporters, for some favor or something like that. It's not used for the purpose that it was set up for. So maybe one solution is raise the national list and then have I think somebody has suggested that maybe the selection of the national list by the political parties, maybe that be subject to some independent verification, so that not everybody can come through the national list. Maybe within the party, maybe the party will think that one of the candidates who lost can contribute in parliament because of experience and knowledge and all that. That you allow that. That's okay, but not put the entire national list the numbers for your supporters or who went and got onto the stage on your behalf during the campaign. So I would suggest, without trying to reinvent the wheel and change any of those things, maybe increase the national list and see that only qualified, competent technocrats, if you want educated, yes, because I don't think, as Salia says, giving limitations or having a minimum qualification is also infringement of any person's right to represent their other voters, that will be an infringement. That means we are saying that people without formal education can't govern this country, and that has been proved otherwise in Sri Lanka as well as in other countries. So, for example, Prime Minister Modi, I think, does not have very high educational qualifications. I don't know whether he's running it properly or not. That's a subjective matter, right? But person like that becomes the prime minister of the most populous country in this world. So if there was a fetter that only a person with a degree could become the prime minister or an MP, maybe Prime Minister Modi or most of the other prime ministers in India would never have. I think the most qualified in India has been Dr. Manmohan Singh on education. I also believe it's an infringement of the fundamental right of a person to represent and who is also voted. It's a fundamental infringement of the fundamental rights of the voters to tell them that you can't vote for this person, you have to vote only for the people we think are suitable. I personally think
I think you are correct. That's why I say I don't know how continue it can be looked at. As opposed to the other point that where we have nationalist, I think that must be strengthened. And then the parties must take the responsibilities. I think with the present protest, I think all parties will learn their lesson. And this protest will also, now I think they have, all the people, now I heard a lot of parliamentarians saying that if we give in, we are going to establish a bad precedence. Not a bad precedent. In fact, we will establish a good precedence. But every party who comes into power, we know hereafter, they cannot play the fool with the citizens of the country and do whatever they want. I think the present protest, in fact, is establishing a good precedence. And I hope the party system will take cognizance of that. On the other matter, Mr. Jayasundar, what you mentioned, that the people have to, when professionals have to come forward by way of election, the question of canvassing and the expenditure, not only in the parliament election that is felt, even in the bar association elections, and that is why we lose people like you all.
If I may be permitted to move on to, there are so many other questions. I think we can take about another 2 questions. So this will be the penultimate question to the panelists. There are several questions we have received on. I think the BSL proposals also address this to a certain extent on how state assets or public funds that have been pilfered or siphoned off and seem to be stored very safely in various tax havens the world over. How is it realistic? I would like the panelists to briefly tell us, is it realistic? From what I have, from from the limited research I have done, I think several countries like the Philippines have tried this, and it had been, in fact, a very costly and sometimes a very unproductive exercise. Is it realistic to secure the public monies that have been siphoned off into various tax havens in the world?
Can I join in? Because the by association, the proposals, I think in Roman 6 of the common minimum common program speaks about this, because there is enough provisions in Sri Lanka to do this. If I can just tell you, so basically the proposal in the minimum common program is to enact proposal Roman 6 is enact in a legislation on proceeds of crime, recovery of state assets, composite law on anti-corruption, regulation of political parties and campaign finance, and necessary amendments to the declaration of assets and liabilities law to enable publication of declarations, so on and so forth. Now, I think there is this, then there are international organizations who like UN organizations who has the mechanism, but one of the main criteria is that we have to be prosecuting here. So there is mutual assistance of in criminal matters and in finance matters, mutual assistance in civil matters. So there is enough, and those are the laws of this country also. And I think it's called a STAR program, where you, and it's based in Holland, Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, where you have prosecuted, and I'm not sure whether it is post-judgment or post-conviction or prior to that, if you want information about these things, those organizations have the capacity for training, all those, it is available. And the laws are available in Sri Lanka also to go and find these things. And although Philippines may not have been very successful, there are countries where it has been, like I think Paraguay or somewhere recently, the prime minister who was living in Brussels was extradited. Found so it has happened. It has happened, and so I think some Liberian president's son was arrested in the United States with all the assets. So the mechanisms are available. It's just that you need the commitment to go and find this.
Can I just add to that? I think there are new laws in certain countries in Europe, including, I believe, the United Kingdom, where you do not have to go through the entire criminal process to recover the asset. So this is what I learned from someone else who have been very active in this in the Attorney General's department. Now, for instance, if there is an asset which is identified in a particular asset which is identified, it is not in the name of a particular politician, or it's not in your own name. You have bought the asset in a different name, but that asset is lying somewhere. Now, if you go through an entire criminal process, money laundering, it will take a month of Sundays to finish. But there is a process by which, and that is not available in Sri Lanka. There is a process by which the asset is seized. The parties are noticed if they want to have a claim to the asset. So we say, this asset is in my name. Then I will, when I'm claiming that asset, I have to show how I had sufficient funds to purchase that asset. It's an action in rem. If I don't claim it, we say it is in my name, but I don't claim the asset. But there is someone else who is the actual owner. I'm holding it in trust for him. He can also claim it. But when he claims it, he has to justify how the legitimacy of the funds. If he fails to justify, the asset is confiscated. Now, then it's not criminal conviction, but it is. I do not know whether it's really quasi-civil, but it's a special procedure by which the asset then is seized and seized by the state, forfeited by the state. So we can look at something like that. I am told that the government of Sri Lanka was in the process between 2015 to 19 to enact this sort of legislation, and there were connections established with the STAR program. And there was, in fact, a task force established by the then president. And there were some investigations which were proceeding, which, of course, perhaps stopped. So these are some of the things which could be done. The Filipino example is interesting. Tonight, I think it's a Filipino election. I don't know whether it's already over.
Monday, I think.
Yes. And the leading candidate is Ferdinand Marcos Jr. 1985, the Ferdinand Marcos was driven out of the country, and he had to flee to abroad. He died in exile, but they returned, and today his son is a leading candidate. And in the Philippine example, I just read in the newspapers that they said they suspect the Marcoses siphoned off $10 billion worth of assets. They have up to now, almost 30 years later, they have recovered $3 billion. So the magnitude of this proceeds of crime, recovery of state assets, it is a big task, and one must understand that is not the solution to the economic crisis at the moment. So if anyone thinks you can bring whatever money and then solve the economic crisis by that is not the way. That is not going to happen.
This will be the final. I think I apologize to any participants whose questions may not have been addressed, but I think we are already running over time. This will be the final question to the panel. Feel free, any of the panelists feel free to answer this. I'm leaving it open. Several questions have been posed with regard to government procurements and how the procurement process is abused or misused. And also with sometimes where the government procurement process is absolutely circumvented by the so-called unsolicited bids mechanism, whereby certain public infrastructure projects, for example, are initiated. So if any of the panelists are willing to comment on that very briefly, I invite you to comment on that.
I think this is Salia's field mainly. If we can have Salia's views, I can add later on, but I am not competent to fully address the question.
Honestly, can you, I didn't quite.
Yes, no, I think the questions is that how the, based on even the BSL proposals, you can comment on it, sir, how the procurement process is being abused, and also how this mechanism of unsolicited bids is being used sometimes to basically used, for example, in various government infrastructure projects, and where basically public funds are going down the drain by these mechanisms. If you can just comment on that.
I also am not, I can't say I'm too competent to answer that question, but certainly I think unsolicited bids must be looked upon with suspicion. And I came across a government guideline saying that if there is an unsolicited bid, then you must make that offer. So we said there is an unsolicited bid, but that whatever the project seems to be promising, then you must open it out. You must open it out to others, then see whether they can match that particular bid. So in general, of course, the procurement processes, I think we have a lot of problems. And this is where I say we can't blame politicians alone. In some of the procurement processes, in matters of corruption, we must also see whether there are officials involved. One of the problems which are highlighted about electricity is that why have we been so slow in going in for renewable energy? Why have we been always going for the diesel power plants, the hydropower plants, the mini plants? Is it because some people have vested interests? And are those vested interests preventing renewable energy? I'm just leaving this to open. I don't want to make any allegations against anyone. But this is what we hear. We hear things being whispered and say that there are interested parties, not politicians, but officials who are blocking renewable energy projects. And as a result, we are paying higher costs for electricity. Now, as much as taking bribes and commissions, I think thwarting those projects, making the public to pay higher amount for energy is, I think, a national crime. And those also must be investigated and dealt with.
Yes, just to add on a personal note to what Mr. Piris just pointed out, I think the two envelope bidding process is the process by which most large-scale government tenders are submitted. That is, there is a price bid and a technical bid. And I think as people who have been involved in litigation relating to tenders, we know that sometimes the technical evaluation committees for the technical bid, which comprise obviously of officials, are engaged in various machinations and circumvention of the law and procedure for self-serving ends. So I think, as Mr. Piris pointed out, the disastrous state of the government procurement process, I think the officials also should share some of the blame.
So, Pulasti, can I just add about this unsolicited proposal issue?
Yes.
I don't know what, there is a term for that, but if you have an unsolicited bid, then the government is then has the obligation to open it up and if anybody, and open it up to any bidder who can match that. I think there's some technical, not a technical term, there's a like a slang kind of a slingshot or something like that, where you open it up. If you have an unsolicited proposal, you put it out, give it publicity, and if anybody can match it or better it, that person is given. But if there's nobody who can match it or better the bid, then that unsolicited bid. So you, even an unsolicited bid, you bring it into a procurement basis for others to have a equal. It's basically equal ground, equal playing field. So that you, even an unsolicited bid cannot, merely because it is unsolicited, can't be thrown out, but the process has to be said. I just can't remember the name that you, there's a name that you do that, use that for.
Okay, I think we have actually exceeded the allotted time slot, and I believe our host Pasinduni is facing some technical difficulties, so I have been asked to wrap up the discussion. I should thank our esteemed panelists and the webinar committee of the Bar Association, headed by Mr. Isuru Balapatamanthi, the Secretary of the Bar Association, and Nikini, Pasinduni, and all of the technical team who assisted us. Thank you very much, Mr. Piris, Mr. Mohammed, and Mr. Jayasundar. I believe we had a very enlightening and interesting discussion, and I have hosted several webinars before. I don't think we have received this many questions and queries from participants as much as in this webinar. So thank you for the involved participation, the engaging participation by the participants. Again, thank you everyone, and we will wrap up our discussion and see you soon. Hope that the country will have a better future. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.